Hello, everyone. Welcome to Overtime. Just about, we believe about an hour ago, Donald Trump filed in Florida. He filed a motion. It looks like he's going to be doing this pro se. We'll get into what that means and why that's important in a minute. But he's filing essentially for two forms of what appears to be injunctive relief against the United States government. We're gonna discuss what all of that means, and we're gonna go through this. I've been through it once already, but I think we're going to need to go through this together because this is an interesting document. With me today is Isandering. So, Isandering, welcome. And all right, let's go through this. Yeah, there is a lot of we're gonna get into this as best we can. So those of you who know my background, I taught law at the high school level. I am not a lawyer. I do have some background in it, but if a lawyer and I disagree, go with the lawyer. I don't care if he got his degree on the back of a matchbook cover. But I do have some experience going over these things for quite some time. But it's right now you're stuck with me. So we're going to go over it, and a couple of things that I want to make sure everybody remembers before we get started. And this needs clarity because I've seen a lot of people on both sides arguing things that are simply not true. It appears that Trump is basically dead to rights I've forgotten the term now. But it's about as solid a case as you can get for him violating at least one of the acts. And I don't have a list of the three acts. I apologize. Had it. I probably left it in the fridge. But he's the search warrant that was issued at Mar-a-Lago was to cover three sections of the U.S. Criminal Code. One of them, the Espionage Act. They pertained to removing documents that he is not permitted to remove, to storing these documents, and essentially destroying, altering, or concealing documents in an attempt to interfere with a government investigation. Those are the three. It's important to realize there's a lot of talk about whether he declassified these documents or he didn't declassify these documents. Now, the Supreme Court has already ruled on classification from the judicial branch, and it's essentially said that all classification and declassification stems from the executive branch. What this means is that the president can basically classify and declassify documents at will. There are two things that you have to be aware of about this, and both of these were made crystal clear by the Supreme Court. The first is there has to be a process for it, and there is, in fact, a process for it. You have to write declassified on it, and you have to go through it. It's a reasonably simple process to declassify if the president so chooses, but he can't just have a standing order to declassify anything he takes out. That notwithstanding, we're going to ignore that for a second. The other thing is, this declassification and classification power stems from the executive branch, but they made a very clear exception to anything that is made classified by legislative order, by law. So if there is something that has been determined to be classified by an alternative legal, specifically by a statute, a statutory classification, that the executive branch cannot declassify. There's only that we're going to be discussing. It just so happens Trump managed to hit two of the biggest exceptions. The first is any nuclear secrets. They are classified explicitly under their own segment. They are classified by statute, meaning Trump cannot unilaterally by himself declassify them. Whether or not a document is classified or not under, if it's a nuclear secret, is determined by the Atomic Energy Act. And Trump has some say, presumably under some circumstances in it, but he alone cannot classify or declassify these documents. So none of the documents that we're talking about in terms of nuclear secrets, he has the ability to declassify in the first place. If he did, all Biden has to do is say, oh, well, they're classified again, and he's once again in position. I mean, there's so many, there is no way in which he can possess these documents. If they are what they purport to be, and we're going to assume going forward that they are. So that's the first thing. Any issue, he didn't follow the proper procedure for declassifying them, even if he had, he cannot declassify these documents. So if they found the documents they say they did, it is as close to just the statutory, violation of the act as you can get. He's done it. There isn't very much you can do to get around that. So that's in pertaining to the classification of these documents. He didn't have the ability to declassify them. The other thing is some of these documents, he is not permitted under any set of circumstances to take out of secure rooms. They were in Mar-a-Lago, so it looks like he's dead to rights on that one too. So I think he's in trouble. So what is he asking for here? First of all, he's been having difficulty, and we're aware of this, getting attorneys. Nobody wants to represent him. There's probably two reasons for this. One, he is notorious for not paying people who represent him. And two, he is asking for arguments that you may not, under certain circumstances, even be able to make legally. And we've seen him do this in the past. He demands his lawyers make arguments that could get them to lose their licenses. Rudy Giuliani is one of said lawyers and will probably never practice law again. His license has already been, I think, temporarily suspended in New York. They're looking into a permanent suspension, and he's done. So everybody knows this. Nobody wants to represent him. He has filed this. Now, he did not write this, so somebody did write it for him. That much is clear. It does have some of his handiwork in it, but not a lot. So he clearly had oversight on it getting written, but he did not write it. Xandrig, please feel free to jump in at any moment if there's something that you think we need to get into. So this is the United States District Court, Southern District of Florida. This was filed about an hour or two ago. Motion for judicial oversight and additional relief. So the biggie on what he's asking for here is two things. Now, in the big bold, he's asking for one thing. He's asking for what's called a special master, which is going to be somebody who is going to be independent and is going to review all the documents. If this gets granted, that means that the FBI must stop going through the documents. They cannot go through them anymore until a special master determines whether or not these were seized legally. Now, he's arguing several things on this front. One of them is that he had declassified these documents, so it doesn't matter. The second thing, which he doesn't appear to be arguing here, is that they weren't actually in his house, so maybe he's given up on that one. I don't know. He wants a return of documents that he never took. I don't know. But the other thing that he's arguing here is that all of the documents fall under executive privilege. We will get into that. But that appears to be something else he's arguing here. He's arguing a lot. At any rate, he wants a special master appointed to do that. That would essentially halt the FBI's investigation until such a special master said that they could go forward. So let's get into what he said. And then the other thing that he buried in this, is, I'm sorry, was it the executive president? No, I'll remember what the other thing is. Oh, yeah. He wants all of these documents returned. So he's essentially saying because they all fall under executive privilege, they're his documents and they all need to be returned to him. He's demanding that all the investigations stop. We'll get into it. So President Donald J. Trump, hereafter called the Movement. I'm not familiar with that term. Through his undersigned counsel. Okay, so he has counsel who was let's see. So he has counsel who has written this, but this was filed pro se. So he appears to be representing himself in this, which is going to be a popcorn. I hope they televise that. Files a motion for judicial oversight and additional relief, which seeks that A, the court appoints a special master, B, enjoins further review of seized material by the government until a special master is appointed, and okay, that's B, and then C, requires the government to provide a more detailed receipt for property. They have one. It's just whether or not they're going to provide it. And D, requires the government to return any seized items that was not within the scope of the search warrant, and states as follows. 1, politics cannot be allowed to impact the administration of justice. Donald J. Trump is the clear frontrunner for the 2024 Republican presidential primary and the 2024 general election, should he decide to run. Beyond that, his endorsement in the 2022 midterm elections has been decisive for Republican candidates. On August 8th, 2022, in a shockingly aggressive move and with no understanding of the distress that this would cause most Americans. Yeah, the only reason it caused most Americans distress is because either they were people who were listening to him saying that this was illegal, which it absolutely was not. It was signed by a judge. It completely followed procedure on this. So either people were distressed because he was distressing people by lying, or it was the other people who knew that this is true, and they now have to deal with a whole bunch of people who are distressed because they believe Trump and the lies that he is saying. At any rate, with no understanding of the distress that this would cause most Americans, roughly 24 special agents of the Federal Bureau, also we learned the head of the Counterintelligence Division of the Justice Department was actually present for the search, which is shocking. Probably it's because of the level of classification. At any rate, 24 special agents of the FBI, directed by attorneys of the U.S. Department of Justice, raided the home of President Donald J. Trump. According to the government agency's documents, privileged and or potentially privileged materials and other items, including photos, handwritten notes, and even President Trump's passports that were outside the lawful reach of an already overbroad warrant. President Trump, like all citizens, is protected by the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. Property seized in violation of his constitutional rights must be returned forthwith. Law enforcement is a shield that protects Americans. It cannot be used as a weapon for political purposes. Therefore, we seek judicial assistance in the aftermath of an unprecedented and unnecessary raid on President Trump's home at Mar-a-Lago in Palm Beach, Florida. Now, what this is going to probably include is, at this point, any judge looking at this is probably going to look at what was the original probable cause for the original warrant. They may also, irrespective of that, find that the original warrant was overbroad. It doesn't appear to be overbroad to me. It lists very specific criminal codes that they believe were violated and anything pursuant to the violation of those codes. Now, it is common practice that they don't sit there and go through all of it in his home. What they do is they take anything that might fall under the warrant, grab it, take it back, they go through it, and they offer to return anything that was incidental that was swept up in their grab. So they're not going to sit there and read all of this classified material in his house before taking it. They just take anything that could potentially fall under the warrant and then return anything that doesn't. His passports fall under that category. So 3 of his passports were seized. They weren't included in the warrant. They offered to return those passports. He declined. Actually, well, he ignored it and then went on Truth Social to run yelling, "Oh my God, they've got my passports and they won't return them." Standard Trump fare. At any rate, from the first moment that the government informed Movent, that's Trump, through counsel, that the search was underway, he demanded transparency. He asked the government questions that any American citizen would ask under these circumstances, namely, why my home was raided with a platoon of federal agents when I have voluntarily cooperated with your every request. I don't know. This smacks of other lawsuits I've seen recently, but anyways, okay. What are you trying to hide from the public, given that you requested I turn off all security cameras, even refused to allow my attorneys to observe what your agents were doing? And why have you refused to tell me what you took from my home? All right, to answer these questions in short order. One, why was my home raided with a platoon of federal agents? Because if you're holding what it looks like you were holding and what they purported taking out, which includes, 4 sets of top secret documents, 4 sets of top secret SCI documents, 3 sets of classified or confidential documents, all that stuff, it takes a lot of agents. Also, they can't show your attorney some of it because he's not read in and it's illegal to show him. Now, This does actually, in my view, argue somewhat for a special master, although now you'd have to figure out how much of the stuff that the special master can view. This has turned into an absolute nightmare, but we've already covered what some of these classified documents, you can only see them. Even the president can't request to see these. He has to have a need to know to be able to see these documents. And quite frankly, the other thing that nobody's really talking about is why the fuck are these documents in his home? He is no longer the president of the United States. He does not have a need to know. He does not have a need for top secret classified information, which we know was in the house. We already knew that because he did, in fact, in early February, return a whole bunch of documents. He did return a whole bunch. They requested a whole bunch. He returned them. But what it appears now is that he said he returned them all, and through a confidential informant who we don't know yet who it is, but through somebody apparently saw these documents at his house. He had reported that he did not have them. They saw them, told it may have been someone from the Secret Service. It may have been his former chief of staff. Who the hell knows who did it? But somebody we know has seen the documents. Told the FBI he's got all this stuff that he's not allowed to have. They went back and seized the rest because he had lied to them. That ostensibly is where the third criminal charge comes from, or the third criminal violation. If he lied about having these documents, that falls under the third one, which was obstruction of a current FBI investigation or deliberately concealing that you're in possession of these documents. Now, the other thing is all three of those do not require that the information actually be classified. So even if he had declassified them, he is still guilty of violating all three of those, at least based on the information that we have so far. It's, dear Lord, it's mind-boggling. So that's why they raided the house. No, he has not replied with every request. At least that's their claim. And they seem to be able to support it. We know, for example, that he did comply, at least partially, by giving them a whole bunch of This is one of those situations. If you're ever caught by the feds doing anything illegal, pro tip: don't partially comply, because when you partially comply, that means you're aware that you're required to comply. You've essentially you've admitted. You can no longer say, well, gee, I didn't realize the severity of it. He gave back some of the documents. That's an admission that he knew they had to be returned. Essentially, if you find even a single document after that, you already have him on. He knew they had to be returned. He can't claim ignorance because he already returned some of them. So you either comply all the way or fight all the way. This isn't one where you want to split the baby. At any rate, he already did comply, at least in part. The fact that he had 11 or 13, I think it was 11 boxes of classified material still at Mar-a-Lago, it's hard for him to argue afterwards, well, gee, I didn't know. He's already partly complied. He's in real trouble, I think, here. At any rate, what are you trying to hide from the public, given that you requested turn off the security cameras? This is the first I've heard of it. My understanding is the cameras did, in fact, catch all of this, and that they wanted to see the cameras and to see what was. I don't know. I can imagine they probably wanted to turn off the cameras because they're handling the most classified documents that this country has, and they didn't want that being recorded. That would be my guess. If they did, I don't know if they did or not. Why have you refused to tell me what you took from my home? Well, they haven't. They gave you a list, but it was not a extremely itemized list, and probably, again, because some of these documents, to even say what the document is to violate the Espionage Act. So you don't want this kind of trouble. My advice is don't take classified documents and put them in your house. That's my thought. I'm not an expert. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer. So, but just like for me, that's what I tell my kids. You know, it's like I have two young girls. Don't take classified documents home. That simple. All right.
Yes, 'cause I'm sure that's a common problem in your household.
Yeah, exactly. He's a regular citizen. So this argument that, he took his work home. A, he's not allowed to take some of these documents home. Even as president, he's not allowed to. B, even if that's true, he's no longer president. Why does he still have them? It's insane. He's
This
quite
actually
clear.
smacks to me.
Mhm.
This smacks to me as he's throwing anything and everything against the wall to see which strands of spaghetti will stick, if any. And it also smacks of delaying tactics, which you know aren't uncommon in the corporate world, because eventually you can just bankrupt the other side. But if that's a tactic that he's trying to employ, the delaying tactic, that's not going to work because the government doesn't really run out of money.
Well, but I think you're right, though, and we're going to get into it in a minute. I do think it's a delaying tactic. I think that's a great observation. I think it's a delay tactic so that he can run in 2024. So if he can delay some of this 2 years, he's not going to take the hit. Is I think what he's trying to do. But I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. All right. So, as set forth in detail below, the government has declined to provide even the most basic information. No, we've seen the most basic information. Excuse me. No, we've seen it. It's been made public. It was unsealed. So we have the most basic information of what they took. If I were him, I would be pissed for not getting a detailed report. He is probably entitled to a detailed report, but there are absolutely exceptions by statute for. I mean, if you have top secret CI documents, they cannot legally tell you what's in those documents or even what those documents are. If one of those documents, just as a one of those documents might be, a list of spies that we're using in France. Well, we don't want to admit that we're sending spies into France. So when you just say what the list is, you have violated a national secret just by saying that such a thing even exists. That is the level of classification that it's like the government doesn't acknowledge half of these things exist, so they can't put it on paper. For fuck's sake. This is the guy who's the most qualified guy to be president, and by the way, that was the other thing. So he signed into law the act that says it's a criminal offense to hold these documents. That was signed by President Trump. Okay. So, at any rate, the scant information the government has provided, yes, they have. So it is the most basic. It's scant. A vaguely worded receipt for property, and the warrant itself raised significant Fourth Amendment. Yeah. For instance, the government has informed counsel for Trump that privileged and or potentially privileged documents were among those taken from his home. The government has refused to provide any information regarding the nature of these documents. Well, the problem is he's also going to have to go with the Department of Presidential Records, because the problem is, even if it's privileged, it ostensibly belongs. That means it can't be used against him, but it may still fall under the purview of the Presidential Records Department. So I don't. Just because it's privileged actually does not mean he owns it, believe it or not. It just means it's a legal term as to what can actually be used against him or made public, but it doesn't mean he owns it. So, yeah, he's got a right to look into the privilege, but that doesn't mean that these have to be returned. Anyways, now I love this. The Supreme Court has held that documents reflecting communications between president and top advisors are presumptively privileged. Protecting the integrity of these documents is important not only to the president, but also to the institution of the presidency. Yes, bingo. That's why they don't belong to the president. They belong to the institution, and they belong, actually, I think they belong to Congress, the Congressional Records Department. So, but he's right. He's right. Congratulations. That's why he can't keep them. Significantly, the government has refused to provide Trump with any reason for the unprecedented general search of his home. Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm having a very hard time finishing that sentence. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, they provide a lot of reasons. They've given a lot of reasons. He's violated 3 criminal acts, pretty big ones, too. One of them's called the Espionage Act. Just saying. Okay. Historic decision to raid the home of a president who has been fully cooperative. Their claim is that he has not been. Now, by nature of the fact, they have to demonstrate a few things that have not been demonstrated. My suspicion is these are all true, but we have to be clear. As of yet, there are some things that we know for a fact, some things we do not know, but we can infer. So, what do we know? We know that he took a lot of records he is not supposed to have. That is, I don't care if he thinks that's an issue, that is clearly not at issue. Otherwise, he wouldn't have returned them in the first place. So when he returned the first set, that is an acknowledgement that he probably should not have had them. He did contest. They had to argue for 2 months before they could finally come in and snag the first set of documents. So the question is, these presumably should not be in his house. If they're classified top secret, if they're classified in the way that the receipt says they were, if any of that is true, which I suspect it is, it's going to be looked into. So that if the FBI is lying, they're going to get caught on this. That's why they don't usually lie in these kinds of cases, especially one that's going to receive this kind of national scrutiny. You can bet members of Congress who are Republican, who do have top secret clearance, probably including the Intelligence Committee, is going to be in on this. So they're going to find out whether this is legit or not, and the FBI knows that. Merrick Garland knows that before putting this in, so I'm pretty sure he probably dotted all his I's and crossed his T's. Nonetheless, if what their claim is that they pulled out these documents that he clearly cannot have, period, end of discussion. That's why we covered it in the beginning. He is not, even if he declassified these things, he still can't have them. There's a statute that makes it a criminal act. Even if they're not classified, he signed it himself. Doesn't matter whether they're classified or not. The reality is they were classified because he is not permitted to declassify these. These were classified not by executive order or flowing from the executive branch. They were classified by statute, which is the only exception to Trump being able to declassify documents while he was president. So it doesn't matter if he had a standing order to declassify every national secret. There are some even can't do that. That's already been decided by Supreme Court. That's the same decision that he's using to say, well, I can declassify these things. That's the exception that was in that Supreme Court decision. So no, even if they were, he's in just as much trouble. It doesn't matter. So, the question is, if he was complying with everything, why did these documents stay here? They clearly requested the documents after 2 months of negotiation. 15 sets of documents were taken from his house that were at this level of classification. How did these get here? They either got here with the original set, meaning he did not fully comply, or for some reason they didn't ask. I mean, it's possible it just escaped their brains. You know, it's like, oh, we didn't want. But he was supposed to turn over all the documents. Why were these not turned over? There are possible ways, like theoretically, that they could have ended up in his house outside of that. But the only reasonable conclusion I think anybody at this point can reach is that they have been in his house since he left the presidency. It's hard to imagine how you get SCI documents in your home unless you took them out while you were president, which means he violated the original subpoena. He only turned over about half of the documents he's got. So it's not conclusive that he's not been cooperating, but by this point, it's beyond any reasonable doubt, in my view. I don't see how he's not been cooperating. I don't think there's any way you can argue that. But anyways, that's what he's arguing. Instead, faced with public backlash, Attorney General has taken the unheard of step of announcing at a press conference he was willing to release portions of a sealed search warrant application. Yeah, and Trump demanded that he do that. Yeah, he demanded that after the fact, but he was in support of it, so I don't know what he's arguing about now. Government leaks to favored media outlets have provided ever-changing and inaccurate, quote, justifications for the politicized conduct of the FBI and the Department of Justice. These unsupported justifications by anonymous sources hint at that is true. Now, you shouldn't. Oh, dear Lord. Yes, there is an anonymous source, and at this point, our read on it is that the anonymous source actually saw these documents, realized how serious it was, and told somebody. The anonymous source has to be either someone very close to Trump to whom he was showing these documents, or even members of his own Secret Service detail. But somebody saw them. That's how they knew. That's how they obtained the warrant, because it was a confidential source. That's what's called probable cause. So there was probable cause for the warrant. That's still sealed. Nobody knows who it was or what they saw. Hint at a breakdown in communication between Trump and representatives of the government, where there's developed a need to obtain a search warrant. Well, clearly there was a need to obtain a search warrant, because otherwise what were these documents doing there, unless he's saying that they weren't trying to get them, but the fact they turned over half of them suggests he knew they wanted them. The actual chronology of events clearly establishes that there was no exigency for a forceful raid and no basis. Well, then why were the documents there? He already turned over a bunch. He needs to explain why these documents were still there. So he requests that the government provides this information. Well, he's got a right to it. So that's not a problem. You should get it if this ever goes to trial. Absolutely. Background. Okay, his voluntary assistance. On January 20th, 2021, Trump and his family left the White House. They moved back to their home in Mar-a-Lago. It's a historic landmark mansion with 58 bedrooms, 33 bathrooms on 17 acres of land, because we need to know that. That move was undertaken that move, like most moves undertaken by most Americans, involved boxes. It was during the day with the boxes in full view. Yeah, I know. When we saw the ones that were labeled top secret and you could see through the boxes because they were transparent, we kind of reported that. After President Trump and his family settled back into their homes, employees from the National Archives and Records Administration inquired as to whether any documents were inadvertently transferred by the movers at Mar-a-Lago, because you inadvertently pulled top secret documents out of, for fuck's sake. Trump voluntarily asked the National Archives and Records Administration to come to Mar-a-Lago and retrieve 15 boxes of documents that had been brought by movers to Mar-a-Lago so they could be transferred back to the NARA headquarters in Washington. So here they are saying the documents obtained, Trump's representative located president, have not been transferred to the national. They located these records. They asked that they be transferred, and yeah, in fact, but that's kind of the problem. If he transferred the first 15 boxes, why were the rest not transferred? All right, so on May 11th, 2022, he voluntarily accepted service of a grand jury subpoena to address to the custodian of those records for the office of Donald J. Trump, seeking the documents be bearing classification markings. So it looks like they sought, which is what you'd expect, any document that has any level of classification. That's what they sought. That's what he's suggesting here. Well, that's a problem, because if that's what they sought, why were there still documents that are that have that marking? It didn't even matter if they were classified or unclassified. They asked for any documents marked classified. They didn't say we want classified documents. So this strikes me that he's shooting himself in the foot. Documents bearing classification markings. All right. And then I'm going to take a break, and we'll pause for a minute. And I do need to speed this up because there's a bit more. His staff conducted a diligent search of the boxes that had been moved from the White House. Through counsel, he invited the FBI to come to Mar-a-Lago to retrieve the documents. Okay. Then where did these 11 come from? All right. Yes, Zendring, any thoughts?
Well, movers don't just accidentally load up TSSCI documents. Those are in a very special room. So some sort of shenanigans had to go on in order to get those outside of a room of their secure location. So that's not an accident. The other thing is I just forgot what the other thing was.
Yeah, my brain is pretty fried too. I've been doing a lot of that.
I actually had a valid point, and apparently I'm once again going to come up dry for valid points. So
we were talking about
oh, I know
Yes.
what I was going to say. His claim on cooperation, one, I'm not entirely sure because that he was, cooperating. We'll have to see how that works out in arguments. But as far as why the warrant was issued, if somebody saw documents, personally saw documents marked TSSCI, and whether he was quote unquote cooperating or not, that still, because of the level of classification, that would have still triggered an immediate response. It's like these are documents that, you know, we can't wait around for a month for lawyers to talk to each other and for you to arrange times that are convenient for you to, or convenient for somebody else. No, those need to be picked up immediately. So yeah, I even if he were cooperating as he claims, that somebody saw that highly classified document, reported it, of course the FBI is going to move immediately. Because you can't just wait around and say, hey, well, maybe who else is going to see these documents in that amount of time? You know, where might they go? How many copies might be made, etc. It's like, no, that would trigger an immediate response.
And so somebody's been seeing them. Somebody's necessarily been seeing them. Otherwise, how'd they get the informant? So he's showing them to somebody. They're not just hanging out in the safe. Yeah. Well, I think so. I mean, for me, the biggie is, if he's complying, then why were the documents there? He seems to admit here that they requested any documents that had a classification marking. That means even if they've been declassified, if they have the classification marking, which a declassified document has, actually. So what they do, the proper procedure for declassifying a document is, once it's been determined that this document is going to be declassified, they stamp declassified on it, and then they stamp by whom and when, so that you can trace how and when these documents were declassified. But it still has a classification marking. Yeah. Yeah, that declassified mark that gives you all of the information and is signed, that it in itself is a classification marking. Yep. So at this point, the only thing that I can see him arguing is that he came into possession of these documents after the original subpoena. Because if the subpoena said it was for any documents that have any classification markings, then if he failed to turn any over, he has now violated all three of those sections, I think. Certainly the final one. He's broken the law if he failed to turn them over, and he was not in compliance. So I don't know. He either has to argue he came into possession of them after the subpoena, and that would be a neat trick. If that happened, oh my God, our problems are bigger than we think they are. It's like, how did he get them after while he was a citizen? Which, by the way, then means he doesn't have the ability to declare. I mean, there is no way out of this for him that I can see. Yeah, and you can't even make the argument, oh well, I missed these, because you have to go through every single document in order to comply. You have to go through all of the documents that you have. Even if it takes months to do it, you have to go through them all to make sure that you are returning anything with a classification mark. So, he can't even claim that, oh, well, these were just overlooked or they were missed somehow, because that still puts him in violation. And if that's the other problem is, presumably he showed them to somebody. Either that or they're just hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. He just got them strewn all over. But somebody saw them. And somebody recognized what they were and went to the Justice Department. So why, as a former president, why didn't he recognize, oh, shoot, I should have turned this over. It fell behind the bedpost. Sorry, I hate it when I drop top secret material behind the bedpost. But I found it now. Call up the DOJ and say, listen, I should have turned this over. Didn't see it. Here it is. 11 boxes that the FBI found pretty quickly. Yeah, I think it's amazing how dead to rights he is on this. At least in my view, I don't know how he's going to get out of any of this. Yeah. I would say, it is troubling that somebody saw these documents. The informant was able to see the documents. Now, there's two possibilities. One is he, like you said, he's actually showing people this stuff. Or two, it could have been somebody who had access to the safe and decided to go snooping as to what was in there, because for any number of reasons, it could have been something as legitimate as, I'm pretty sure that I saw some other classification markings. They were looking for the PP tape. We can just say they were looking for the PP tape. It's just like, yeah. Exactly, yeah. So and they then came across those and went, oh my God, these are, these shouldn't be outside of their, controlled room. Plus, there's a bunch of other crap in here that should not have been taken. And, they were quite disturbed by what they had found in the safe. I mean, that's hopefully what actually happened, because, I would really, it's a little frightening to think that Trump might have been showing some of these, very highly classified documents to just other people.
So yeah, hopefully that's what happened, is that, they were in the safe the entire time. He wasn't just out, showing people willy-nilly these
Well,
documents, and that somebody stumbled across them. But I guess we'll find out, hopefully.
and that begs the other question, which we haven't been asking too much of. We've asked on occasion, but is really the only question in my mind on all of this. It's great to talk about the law and the consequences, yada, yada, yada. Why does he have them? Why does he have them? Why does he have them? He is a private citizen. He is not consulting for the government. They're not sitting there saying, well, we got problems with our nuclear program and we need you to solve this, so take these documents home with you even though you're a private citizen. Now we'll make sure you're read in on all this, or make sure it's declassified. Or why does he have them? He's got zero reason.
Correct. Yeah, I don't think he has zero reason to have those kinds of documents either. But it could. I try not to ascribe malice when incompetence. I agree. Explain it. So it could just be hubris that he was like, "Ooh, I was president. I'm entitled to have these cool documents here," and so he just took them.
Oh, so, I agree. I'm not trying to suggest that he was trying to sell them, although I think that's a possibility, and we've discussed that, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. But the reality is there's no reason.
They need to find out.
Even if he's declassified them, even if he could have declassified them, which he couldn't, even if, give him the best possible case of everything he's ever said, most of which isn't true. Why does he have them? There's no reason for him to just declassify these documents and take them home. He hasn't even addressed that. He's like, well, I can declassify them. Okay, fine. Let's pretend they were declassified. Why do you have them? He hasn't given a single reason as to why he's got any of these things. All right. So here he talks about how they came to pick up the first set of documents. Trump greeted them in the dining room of Mar-a-Lago. This is the precise kind of thing that you never, ever, under any set of circumstances, put into this document. This was either done by an amateur or Trump insisted that this get put in. The problem is you think it strengthens your case because you're sitting there saying, oh yeah, the informant is Kanye West. I think this was written by Kanye West, but nonetheless, the reason you never put this in is because you're granting facts that may get you thrown under the bus. If he met them there personally, now he can't say, well, my lawyers did this without my knowledge. He knows why they were there. He greeted them personally, so he has just taken a whole bunch of potential things that he can argue, including, again, well, gee, I didn't know the government was interested in these things. He can't argue that anymore. He met them there personally. This is the kind of detail you never, ever put into one of these documents. There's no need for it. It doesn't accomplish what you think it accomplishes, and it puts you on the hook for a whole bunch of other shit. So, for whatever reason, President Trump greeted them in the dining room at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, so he admits that he knew how important this was. He told his last words to the FBI agents were as follows: "Whatever you need, just let us know." Okay, fine. They inspected the storage room. Counsel for Trump advised the group that he had authorized them to take anything in that room. I don't know what that means because presumably the safe wasn't in that room. We didn't offer the safe. I don't know. But and if they didn't know it was in the safe, saying take whatever you want, if you're hiding something under the floorboards, that doesn't exonerate you. But all right. They inspected, they left. Once back in the dining room, thank you. You did not need to show us the storage room, but we appreciate it. Well, yeah. This is not helping this case, but I'm going to move on because I want to wrap this up. So let's see. In response, Trump is dedicated to put a second lock on the store. Okay. So when being advised that the storage room needed to be secured, he added a second lock. Yay. He continued to assist the government. Members of his staff were made available for voluntary interviews, application for a search warrant. Despite the voluntary assistance provided, the government took the unprecedented step of requesting a search warrant for his home. Okay. The government sought, but this still doesn't address the fact that they found what they were looking for. He hasn't addressed any of that. If they found it, it sounds like what he's trying to imply is, he told them already that these boxes were here. They just didn't pick up the boxes on their first go, and they could have come and got them at any time. He's implying that. He hasn't said that. And this is where it gets cute. I think the reason he hasn't said that is because that would be demonstrably a lie. and whoever is preparing this for him does not want to lie. They're an officer of the court. They cannot lie, knowingly lie on one of these applications. So he has absolutely not said that the FBI was aware of these documents. He's implied it. He's implied that he fully cooperated and they could have taken the documents at any time, but he hasn't said it. And that's very, very important. He knew this was going to go public. This is designed to get people to think that he's been fully complying, but he hasn't addressed any of the fundamental issues. And there's nobody looking at this who knows anything about the law who would not realize that immediately looking at it. Okay, the search warrant was signed on Friday, August 5th. Now, this is important because he's going to also argue why they wait so long to issue the warrant. A couple of reasons, and we already know the reasons. They wanted to coordinate with the Secret Service. They wanted to make sure that he wasn't there, because if he tries to defend the documents, if he sits there and physically impedes a member of the FBI taking this document out, now you've got a problem, because the members of the FBI can put their hands on him and arrest him. The problem is the Secret Service cannot permit them to do that. So you have a very serious fucking problem if it turns out that that he tries to stop the documents from being taken, which I think is a distinct possibility. So they decided to wait until he wasn't there, which they usually try to do with these kinds of search warrants. That's why they waited. Unprecedented search of his home. Heated discussion ensued as to why the government did not make voluntary request for further. Well, I will tell you this too. Here's the other thing. If they believe you're hiding documents, they don't sit there and request the documents if they believe you're deliberately hiding them. Why? They don't want to tip their hand that they know you've got them. They don't want to tip their hand as to what they know and don't know. So now Trump's got no idea if, let's assume Trump's hiding other documents. What if they didn't get them all? He doesn't know whether they've gotten them all. If they've been tipping their hand and saying, well, this is what you've got, this is what you've got, this is what you've got, now he's got a list of what they know and what they don't know. That's why this isn't rocket science. All right. Made several requests. The first request made was that the closed circuit television be turned off. That was not my understanding that he made that request. If he did, okay. Pursuant to Mar-a-Lago policy and absence of a court order, the request was declined. All right. So this would explain why the cameras were on and probably why they seized the video. At least my understanding is they seized the video. Requested the names of any attorneys who might arrive at Mar-a-Lago on behalf of President Trump. Well, that's wise. That's a good idea. You want to know who's representing him if they show up. If somebody could just sit there and say, I'm representing him, and you don't know. So, declined to provide the search warrant and affidavit stating that after the FBI is finished, will be provided, and that's usually how it's done. I think they actually do have to produce it on request if the lawyer's there and says, I want to see the warrant, they have to provide it as they're doing it. If nobody requests it, they have to provide it to you at the end of the search, and they just give you a copy. All right. Counsel General Area. Oh, my God. He uses the word unprecedented a lot. I think he thinks the more times he uses unprecedented, it's going to have an impact on somebody reading this. The search took 9 hours. Thanks for letting us know. An FBI agent provided one of the attorneys outside for 9 hours with a copy of the search warrant. Yeah, that's, again, usually how it's done. If he requested the search warrant, he should have provided it sooner. There's probably state statutes regarding this. I don't know what they are. Usually, please.
You know how you get president to do something? You do something unprecedented.
Good point. I like that. Absolutely. Yep. All right. In addition, counsel for the president asked for a copy of the affidavit, agreed to the appointment of a special master. Well, first of all, I would not agree to anything in the middle of the execution of a search warrant. I'd say your guys will call my guys and we'll sort it out. Allow Trump to inspect what had been seized. No, he's not required to offer that. He is absolutely not required to do that. Provide a detailed list of what was taken. Yeah, that he normally has to do, but if it includes documents that you can't read or even say the title of, there may be an issue. We discussed that already. Moving on. And then I'll hit the live chat. I think the rest. Okay. Yes, the Merrick Garland coming out and saying that he personally approved the order is unusual. Obviously, Trump is taking issue with that. The reality is, if Trump didn't make a huge deal about it and say, and issue so many things that we know are lies. This is what you had said earlier, is Andrew, about the spaghetti. He's just like, well, there were no documents. Everything was planted. The second you have the platform of a former president of the United States and you say that the FBI has planted material in your house, I think the head of the Justice Department gets to come out and say, this is what we're doing. You don't get to have a platform like that and then get pissed when they reply to it. That was his first claim, and he's made a bunch of other completely horseshit claims since then. I'm sorry, you don't want them to come out and contradict you. Don't lie in public. See my last joke about recursion, Sinister Porpoise. Thank you. All right. So I think. At this point, the only other thing that we really need to hit is the warrant is overbroad. The Fourth Amendment requires searches deemed necessary should be as limited as possible. Well, this search was limited to any documents pertaining to the violation of 3 acts of the criminal code. What this has done, and we've had this discussion before, if they find crack cocaine while they're doing it, they can't search for any illegal activity. It has to be narrow. They said 3 specific codes that they believe were violated. Presumably, they've got the and they said why. They said what their probable cause was, which was somebody who had seen these documents. So they're searching for anything related to documents similar to what he had seen that violates any of these 3 codes. That's it. That's what they took. That's all they're entitled to keep. So if they've got his my secret plan to do whatever other illegal activities. They can't use that against them. They can keep it probably, but they can't actually use that against them in a court of law because it wasn't in the original warrant. Let's see. The specific evil, none of the per se, but rummaging through a person's belongings. Yeah, they get to rummage through your belongings looking for anything that is potentially in keeping with the warrant. This is all ludicrous. All right. I think we're gonna. The rest, I think we can get into for some other show. This is really supposed to just be breaking news. So, it's again. He seems to be representing himself pro se. I'll do a quick rundown of what we're looking at and what we've covered, and then I think I'll call it and we'll move on. Is Andrew any thoughts on this so far? I'm actually going to do one more quick review. Just go hit it while you're talking. But any final thoughts?
And then you're, as soon as I start, you're gonna and the rundown.
Okay, and then so let's that's a good idea. I think let's do the rundown, and then you can have fun. Now you know what I always like to be the last one talking. So why don't you say your final thoughts? Whenever you're ready, just start with those final thoughts. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay.
Just whenever you're ready. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now you can go.
And go. How about now? Now?
No, you can do it now.
Okay, now.
Go for it.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I think that it's a bit of kabuki theater on his part. He's trying to play up a game or a narrative. He's throwing everything he can against the wall to see if anything at all can stick, possibly, and engaging in delaying tactics. Probably again to support his narrative that this is retaliatory and premeditated to try and prevent him from being able to run in the election, and that was the reason that they're doing all of this, was just to stop him from being able to run for office. So I don't see how this really ends well for him, because they have him dead to rights. It's like they issued a warrant saying we're looking for this. They executed the warrant, and I don't care if you call it unprecedented. I know it sounds cheeky, but that's how you get precedent, is to do something unprecedented. I think taking these kinds of documents from the White House home was pretty unprecedented, so it would require an unprecedented response. So I just don't see how he gets out of it. They found the documents they claimed they were looking for. I mean, how It's like, I don't normally trust my government to be competent, but it doesn't seem like they really screwed this up. It seems like they did a reasonably effective job at executing this warrant, looking for specific stuff that they were tipped off that he had, and they couldn't allow him to continue to have, even if he was cooperating. So I just see this all as theater on his end.
So, and what he's asking for again is a special master to review all of it and decide what belongs to Trump and what doesn't. But he's actually hit here, and I've got this highlighted, and this is the important part. He's buried this in it. But what he says is, what he said at the beginning was, well, gee, some of these documents are going to fall under privilege. But what he says here when making the actual argument outside his introduction, the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago on August 8th were seized from Trump and were created during his term as president. Accordingly, these documents are presumptively privileged. What he's arguing there is all the documents. The documents seized, that scope covers all of the documents. So what he's trying to do is say every single document is presumptively covered by executive privilege until proven otherwise. That means a special master is going to have to go through every single document, and the U.S. government would ostensibly have to read him in, which is the other thing. He's holding national security secrets hostage, because here's the problem. Do you read the special master in so that he can actually see these documents and determine whether or not they were privileged or whether or not they actually contain national security? If the judge does this, and by the way, I don't think this should be a consideration whether or not the judge approves this or not. But if the judge does, this is going to create one hell of a fucking nightmare. But Trump's argument is essentially that every document there was privileged. It is assumed privileged unless otherwise noted. It was also not classified, because he does mention that he declassified all of these documents, which he is not permitted to do. There is, and even the Supreme Court has already ruled that anything that is classified by statute, he cannot declassify, and that is every one of the documents that we're talking about. And then the FBI is no longer allowed to look at, review, neither is the Justice Department. Nobody's allowed to look at the documents until they're cleared by the special master. What that means is every document, then the FBI has to decide whether they're going to read the special master in, whether he's going to be permitted to see those documents. If he is, then he makes a decision on whether or not that it falls under privilege and whether or not they're entitled to it, and it falls under the warrant. So he's basically saying, I want an independent third party to do this. He's given no grounds that I can tell for doing that. In my view, I kind of like it when judges lean towards doing it, but there has to be some grounds for this, and it looks like this would bring the investigation to a grinding halt as they go over every document with this guy. He hasn't given any grounds that I can see. So I think you're right. I think it's a delaying tactic. It creates one hell of a mess if this goes through. And the other thing is, on some level, they've got another problem, because if, I don't know what they do here. Think about this for a second. The special master cannot review the documents unless cleared by, I think it's the Atomic Energy Administration, AEA. Unless cleared by them, he can't even look at them. If he doesn't look at them, then by this argument, they are presumptively privileged and they have to be returned to President Trump. That's his argument. He wants the documents back that the FBI planted. So at this point, it's like, okay, because they're classified.
That were accidentally loaded up.
That were actually, yes, exactly. These are the documents he wants back. So at this, yeah, thank you. That's a really good catch. Really good catch. Yes, the documents that were accidentally loaded are privileged, and he wants them back. So that would mean if the special master is approved under the conditions outlined here, that the special master would need to see the documents. If he doesn't see the documents, he would, under the argument here, presumably he would have to say, okay, they're privileged, and return them to Trump, which is still a problem because it still belonged to the presidential archives, which is essentially something he inadvertently ceded at the beginning of this. So, I mean, it's, as far as, I mean, this is an okay filing. I've seen worse. I've seen better. He's certainly putting in information that's throwing himself under the bus. He just doesn't realize it. But whoever wrote this clearly wasn't him, but was clearly taking direction from him, because they said some things you do not want to cop to in this. But we've already covered it. So, and his argument here, and he gets into this, okay, the Department of Justice is biased. They won't protect his rights, yada, yada, yada. So that's why he wants a special master. So for those of you joining us at this point, what we have is about 2 hours ago, maybe a little more, Trump filed a motion. He is representing himself, apparently, at least on the claim. It said that Donald Trump is represented by Donald Trump pro se. That means that he is representing himself. Somebody obviously wrote this for him, and he does admit it was written by counsel. In fact, we could probably find their signature down at the bottom. Having said that, I'm not going to get into all of the things here, but ostensibly what he appears to be arguing, and he doesn't say he's arguing this, but he gets into finally arguing it, but he's essentially arguing in part for a return of the documents, at a minimum for a special master to be assigned by the judge. The special master would determine document by document what is privileged. He is arguing that all of it should be considered privileged. He's also arguing that none of it was classified because he had already declassified all of it. That cannot possibly be true. We've covered how and why. That's already been decided actually by a Supreme Court decision a while back that explicitly said that a president cannot declassify anything that's been classified by statute, and these are all classified, every single one of them classified by statute. So no, they were not declassified. At any rate, we'll see. He wants them back, and he wants them all declared as part of privileged communications, even the documents that existed before he was born, ostensibly, and are classified nuclear secrets. So that's where we stand. I don't know. Anything I missed? Yeah.
Putting my evil genius hat on for a moment, there could be another reason for him doing this, because he's now claiming that essentially is claiming that this is politically driven, and he wants an independent, neutral party to examine everything, because the average American isn't going to know what kinds of problems that will create, because of what kinds of documents and stuff we're talking about here, as to whether an independent individual would actually be cleared in order to look at many of these documents. So the average person isn't going to realize the problems. Yet he can still claim, and not really be lying, even though he's being dishonest when he makes the claim, that that he believes this is politically motivated, and he was moving to have independent people verify and examine these documents to ensure that this isn't just a political hit piece. It's going to probably get declined. I would imagine it would get declined because of the problems that it could cause, and the fact that there doesn't seem to be legally much justification for it. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a lawyer either, but he can go out to kind of his hardcore base of people that seem to dismiss anything bad that he does, and still worship at his feet, and say that this is a political hit job. I wanted and tried very hard, but the deep state has struck back against me to stop impartiality, so that they can continue with their politically motivated attack against me. So in my evil genius hat, that seems to be kind of the motivation for some of the stuff that he's doing, in addition to just the more pragmatic, let's try and essentially slow this down to a snail's pace at the very least, and maybe possibly even stop it if we could get this motion through. So,
well, here's the thing that I see. I think it may be dawning on him how much trouble he's in. It's been a very long time since I've seen any human being in this kind of trouble. If this is as it purports to be, which right now it certainly seems to be. If everything is as it appears to be, he is in an immense amount of fucking trouble. And that's assuming that he wasn't doing something illicit with these things. That's just assuming that he was an idiot. Now, if he runs again, and if he wins, to which I foresee a couple of obstacles, in theory, he can pardon himself for all of this, So he may be seeing at this point the only way that he can keep himself out of jail is to become president again, pardon himself unilaterally for all of it, and then he's free and clear. Now, we've already talked about why he may actually not ever be able to run again. There's a statute, all that other good stuff, which he signed. But that notwithstanding, I'm wondering if that thought has crossed his mind. And so if he can slow this down to throw everything he's got at it and slow it down and win, he's home free. I think that's a long shot, but I suspect that plan has dawned on him, and that may be what he's looking to do here. Anyways, all right. That's what we've got. That's the rundown. Thank you, Xandering, for coming and joining us. Thank you all. Right now on the schedule, we've got Commander McMillan on Thursday. We'll see. I'm anticipating more news throughout the week. Commander McMillan, Thursday, will be doing another off time. It should be a lot of fun. I hope you guys will join us. In the meantime, thank you all for coming, and we'll be keeping an eye on it for you. So thank you all, and have a good night.